I would like to invite, therefore, our first speaker. So, Namita and Dhruv, welcome to share your screen if you can.
Okay. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from India. My name is Dhruv Verma, and I work with Wetlands International South Asia and India. It's my pleasure to speak in front of you about the work we are doing in India. So today we are going to share our work on Eco-DRR, where we are trying to build community resilience through Eco-DRR measures, largely solutions around wetland management. So the case we are going to present is about Tampara wetland, which is in Odisha. So I hope you enjoy the slides and I look forward to your questions. So first of all, to give you an overview, where is the wetland? So in India, if you see the map on the left-hand side in the inside, so this coastal state or the coastal province in India is called Odisha. I think most of you who have worked on cyclones and hazards, they know about the very famous super cyclone in 1999. So there is a freshwater wetland very close to the coast, and it's called as Tampara wetland. So the beauty of this wetland is it's very close to the to sea, but it's a freshwater wetland which hosts a multitude of ecosystem services, right? So sharing about some key ecosystem services and functions, which makes this wetland an area of interest. So first of all, being a wetland, it's a source of fresh water. Secondly, it's also integral to the livelihood systems because the place where it is, most of the community members, they work on primary sector, which means agriculture, fishing, and so on. Besides that, one of its main function is to buffer extreme events. Extreme events as in cyclones, floods, cyclonic storms, and so on. In addition to that, it's also home to several species, not only important from conservation point of view, but also from economic point of view. And being nested within communities, or the other way around, the communities, they value this ecosystem because a lot of spiritual as well as religious values are associated with this wetland, right? So once we did a survey or an assessment of ecosystem services, and we tried to understand what kind of gender perspective is attached to this wetland, right? I'll come to this differentiated perspective in the later slides. Now, this wetland is undergoing changes. So what changes are there? If we look at the wetland only in an isolated space, maybe we don't see much changes that are adverse. But if we look at the landscape level, we'll notice some changes. And these are, first of all, looking at the basin or the catchment of this particular wetland. Fragmentation of the channels, basically all the inlets and the outlets, they are disturbed. So because of linear infrastructure, because of highways, because of agriculture and other things, the hydrological regime of this wetland is fragmented. Similarly, smaller wetlands, village ponds, associated ecosystems like marshes. So all those systems are now converted into other land use categories, which means agriculture, aquaculture, human settlement, and so on. Besides that, when the hydrology is disturbed, what happens in case of Tampara, and I think even most of the cases, the water holding capacity of the wetland reduces. A lot of sedimentation and siltation happens. Wetland area reduces, and that's where the functions and the services of any system gets impeded. So, looking at these changes, what we did under two projects. So basically, we started with a program called Partners for Resilience, and recently in a UNEP-funded Eco-DRR project. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to implement Eco-DRR measures with the help of communities so that they build their resilience and capacities to cope with these water-related risks. So how we are going to do it? So looking at in three clusters. So what we are going to do is, first of all, we are implementing several.
Vamos a implementar varias medidas en el terreno. O sea,
then discussing with communities about the values of ecosystem, and based on that, developing a community-based wetland management plan, restoring other ecosystems in the landscape, such as village ponds, agricultural fields, inlets and outlets, and so on, and afforestation and soil conservation measures in the landscape. Besides that, in order to communicate the importance of Eco-DRR, we also we're working on sensitizing and capacity building of the stakeholders, which means we have basically three kinds of stakeholders. First of all, the communities who are wetland dwellers. So there we are working on sensitizing them basically about wetland management, its importance, adopting sustainable livelihoods, which means moving away from using of chemical fertilizers and trying to adopt some eco-friendly measures, and also about DRR. Similarly, the community, the civil society organizations, self-help groups, and community-based organizations are also oriented about sustainable livelihoods. And last but not the least, what we are trying to do as a part of upscaling and mainstream Eco-DRR is basically to integrate the considerations of wetland management and largely Eco-DRR into developmental plans and schemes. So basically what we are trying to do is integrate Eco-DRR in employment schemes where community members or rural people, they get employment for working on different kind of activities, and there they have a large focus on nature resource management. So there we are trying to get Eco-DRR thinking integrated in the whole the planning process. Similarly, livelihood missions and even district disaster management plans. So district is basically a smaller area in a province. So basically, this is how we are implementing our project. Now, coming to some of the activities we undertook in this project. So first of all, we need to understand where and what kind of risk we have. So if you look at these pictures on the right hand side, you can see a cyclonic storm is coming up, and on the bottom side, several women are doing community-based risk mapping. So they are identifying where they are situated, where they have resources, and from where the risks are coming, right? So based on these exercise, we were able to develop an illustration of risk in the landscape. So you can see different part of landscapes have different kind of risk and problems, right? So for example, we have some mining issues, we have fragmentation of ecosystems, we have encroachment issues, we have changes in land use, land cover, and so on, right? Now, coming to when we get a sense of what kind of risk we have, we try to delve into what kind of wetland management plan we want to see. So if you see, this is basically a community, an illustration of community-based wetland management plan, where this particular, I would say it's a painting made by the community members themselves. So if you see this first snapshot of the wetland management plan, you can see it shows basically where is my wetland. Knowing about where my wetland is very important, because as you know, wetlands are transition ecosystems, right? So these are the ecosystems where land and water meet. So to understand where the wetland is, to what extent it spreads, and then how we can conserve it, right? What are the challenges there for a particular wetland? Similarly, when we ask the communities, obviously you were managing it in the past, but what do you think did not work well? So those things are also showcased here. So if you see, maybe the practices of wetland management, water extraction, resource extraction from wetland, and developmental activities in the landscape was not that much aligned with how water behaves in the landscape. And in the last snapshot of this particular illustration is that how we can conserve it and who will do it. So basically, to do this conservation, we identified several wetland champions, which are basically youth, women's self-help groups, and other community-based leaders who can drive this this noble agenda of wetland management in this landscape. Now, some of the snapshots I'm sharing from the field, and uh, we made bamboo float, which is basically a roosting place for water birds, and also planning to place some native plants so that the excess nutrients can be removed from the wetland and it reduces the pollution load. Similarly, I think in most of the developing countries, plastic is definitely a challenge, and through awareness and through orientation activities, we were able to have several rallies to clean the wetlands and to remove plastic from the landscape. Uh, Talking about livelihoods, because it's very important to have not only alternate livelihood options, but also people adopt it. So through the government policies like livelihood missions and so on, we were able to highlight uh, the wise use of wetland resources. So here you can see using bamboo, fish nets were made. It reduces the plastic load on the wetland, and communities also appreciate how they can use wetland resources in a more sustainable manner. And the last photograph shows plantations, and the plantation is basically it's not a very sporadic plantation, but we tried to identify strategic locations, as in where the erosion is coming from, right? So to arrest soil erosion, we identified several species which are local to this area, and we uh, uh, undertook a plantation drive where we also made sure that the local people, not only the government officials, but people like women self-help groups, people who live there, uh, they come forward to do this activity, and they pledge to maintain it and nourish it, right? So that's all basically from the case, and some of the learnings which we have from this project so far is basically, yeah. First of all, I think understanding the local context is very, very necessary, because if you work in, let's say, in India, or you work in Indonesia, or any other country, or even a landscape, the context is very different. Be it the how like the geography is there, how the landforms are there, even how the socioeconomic conditions are there, and trust me, even the historical and political scenario also, can play a very major role in implementation of a Eco-DRR project, because we have seen this influence of historical as well as political situation in another field where we are implementing Eco-DRR project. Second point is about community ownership and their engagement. Since during the inception stage also, we were in the field, we discussed it with the leaders, with all the stakeholders, as in how we want to implement this project. And I think that basically gives a very good support from community, that how we can go ahead and implement this Eco-DRR project. Third point is about local traditional knowledge, as in like know-how of how they used to uh, reduce the disaster risk, how they used to cope with disasters, and how they used to manage their ecosystems. But definitely science has a role to play, but I'm pretty sure, and most of you will agree to it, that traditional knowledge does play a good role, uh, and it should be there in our Eco-DRR plans. The fourth point is about landscape and basin scale. Why it's important, and I think it's also there in the nature-based solutions global standards, that looking at a site in a silo, in isolation, might not work completely. Because when we understand what kind of challenges are there, how any ecosystem or any system is transforming, we might find the reasons at the landscape level. And similarly, the values and the solutions might also, we might find them at the landscape level. That's why I think we might need to broaden the scale, understand the context, and then prepare a strategy to work at particular location and clusters. The second last point is about scientific assessments. I think it's very important to understand the context from communities, to work with communities. But scientific assessments, they really make it a foolproof implementation measure. Because when we worked in this case, we were not sure where the water is coming from, what kind of water quality is there. So for that, we need to have some sort of scientific assessments, be it remote sensing and GIS, be it modeling and other stuff. Last but not the least, to ensure that these measures they remain for longer run, they are sustainable. I think we need to, and also I think to ensure it's widely accepted, I think we need to find out how it is important for other sectors. Other sectors means, let's say your tourism department, your linear infrastructure department, rural development, water resource development, and so on. So this cross-sectoral integration and convergence funding will definitely help in upscaling and mainstreaming Eco-DRR. So with these words, I'll finish my slide here, and I am open to the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dhruv. It was a really interesting presentation, and really gives kind of a really great overview of a whole project cycle at the same time, with some of the learnings and challenges. If you have, I think we will have time to take one question. So if somebody would like to raise your hand, you're welcome to ask a question.
I would like to ask, is there any interdisciplinary approach when planning on this? It means professional bodies integrated with these planning processes. I would like to ask that question. Is it clear?
Okay. Yeah, I think you're asking during the planning phase, how interdisciplinary the planning was, something like that?
Yeah. What are the professional bodies, and what is the approach for integrating the environmental and engineering measures? So there's a gap in between. So that's my approach. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So basically during the planning phase, what we did, obviously, Wetlands International is largely works on wetlands, which means, let's say, ecosystems. But we have a team of other like environmental sociologists, communication expert, disaster professionals, and so on, right? But that doesn't mean that we have capacities of all the sectors. So what we did, we went to the field, and when we held discussions with communities, we got to know that even communities, they do have a great knowledge about other sectors, for example, water resource, for example, disasters. And based when we were in the field and when we conducted surveys, we got to know that other sectors are also, they have a they have a stake in this kind of project. So we communicated and we brought them on board. Sectors like, let's say, the wetland authority, right? A climate change department. Similarly, the livelihood mission. So I think when we understand what kind of values and threats we have for that particular system, we try to connect these dots with other sectors. I hope I have answered your question, but if I could not, I will write. I will text you in the chat box.
Great.
Actually, thank you.
So we'll be moving on to our next presentation before the break. So I hope you're still keen to hear a little bit more. And I'd like to invite, I think, Antonio Arque, or whether it's his colleague Wendy, I'm not sure, who's presenting the next keynote. So are you, Antonio, or Wendy? Are you Wendy? Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Here to present on climate justice and urban EBA, and particularly with a focus on Global South with some implications for disaster risk reduction. One of the things, presenting on EBA, of course, in a Eco-DRR conference, is really wanted to start out by highlighting the overlap and the integratedness of both these approaches. EBA is, both EBA and Eco-DRR are conserving, restoring, and sustainable management of ecosystems to address two different challenges. In the case of EBA, EBA addresses climate adaptation, whereas Eco-DRR is the conservation and restoration, sustainable management of ecosystems for disaster risk reduction. Within these, of course, there is overlap in the sense of where EBA is, we would say, more long-term thinking, more about climatic hazards, and Eco-DRR is more risk management for both climate and non-climatic hazards. There is overlap in this where they both address climate risk management and as well as hazards. So just this graph, which I'm sure you've probably all seen before and has been replayed multiple times. And so in presenting this and what is the need, my apologies, I'm looking over here. So you have, this is an example then of EBA from this project that was implemented, looking at the state of river embankments in Durban, South Africa. On the photo on the left, we have the river flooding, and you can just see all the damage to the homes. And on the right is vegetation being grown on the riverbank that helps minimize the impact of flood. And as we're looking at this, there are two challenges in implementing EBA overall that we found with this, that we identified for the study. The first was that there's not enough information, not enough practical information for implementing EBA. There are lots of examples from around the world. A lot of these tend to focus on rural or natural ecosystems, whereas there was a dearth of information for urban ecosystems. And a second challenge was that the climate justice perspective is not always taken into account. One key factor of EBA is, that you're helping ecosystems and people adapt to the impacts of climate change. But a lot of the times the focus on people is not very strengthened. So this study that I'm going to present today was looking specifically at climate justice and wanting to drive in deeper and much further into that approach in order to strengthen the social aspects of EBA. And going back to the first challenge, the main three issues that appeared was that the lack of information, as I mentioned, that this is scarce, where even the information is scarce on urban ecosystems, it's even more scarce in the global south. For example, you have in India, where adaptation action is more focused in rural areas and in cities, but this is also replicated around. And then the third is that there's knowledge and insights derived from the global north, but this cannot often not be very easily transferable, right? The contexts are different, the social, political, economic contexts are different. In the previous keynote that we talked about this in being able to integrate the political context as well. And for the second challenge, when you're talking about climate justice, you have marginalized groups not included in, historically marginalized groups not included in decision making. So when we're talking about indigenous peoples, minority groups, women, youth had fewer opportunities to be involved in this project. And then there's need to recognize that climatic hazards impact most often these marginalized groups. All right, so talking about the study, the desire for the study then was to develop more knowledge in the global south in order to share this and really develop a menu of options where, thinking about a menu is like you can just be able to take it and apply it to your specific context. So having the specific know-how, what a measure, what are the examples of the measures that were implemented, how could they be better implemented? And so looking at then this and bringing in together different examples of implementation to have practitioners learn from successful stories and not just successful stories, to also be able to learn from failures. What are the challenges that other people experienced and how can someone who's interested in applying EBA be able to address these challenges? And so in identifying this, of course, Plan Adapt reached out to IUCN, and I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. My name is Wendy and I work with IUCN. But for this working group, the Urban EBA working group was developed through the Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation and was co-chaired by PlanAdapt and IUCN. So coming together really to develop this study. And so looking at bringing together lots of different examples, looking to bring different practitioners working in Urban EBA. So, you know, the working group is comprised of PlanAdapt, as I mentioned, IUCN, ICLEI, you have members from UNEP and a number of other organizations. And so the social principles of the EBA paper proposed are based off of the Bali climate justice principles, but as well as compiling different literature. These are the 7. You have participation and inclusiveness, capacity building, fairness and equitability, taking into consideration gender and gender identity, livelihood improvement, appropriateness of scale, which we discuss not just as scaling up, which is often what we're talking about, but you're also thinking about scaling up, scaling wide, and scaling deep. So if it's national level information, how can that be more localized? How can local examples be broadened? And how can we scale across you know, more vertically? And then a final one is integration of indigenous and local knowledge. Looking at the results, just a very broad view from the survey, there were 31 case studies which were submitted, and majority of them came from the Global South. 61% of these case studies included very diverse adaptation strategies, including, you know, not just limited to ecological, but also social, physical, and institutional measures. So on the graph to the right, there are a number of examples of what these measures would be: renaturalization of river systems or developing of buffer zones, as the first photo that I showed, urban forests and parks, instituting, you know, having more street trees, and so on and so forth. 74% of the cases reported high or medium potential for local stakeholders, civic engagement and empowerment. And 61% of cases reported equal access to the benefits for women and men, while only 25% indicated that women were represented in the decision-making process. So of course, there's a lot of opportunity here to bring up that number and have a more equitable representation. And another example here again is that majority of the EBA projects have adopted participation and inclusiveness principles. So I think this is good in terms of the work that has been done so far, that this is automatically being integrated. More than 40% of those implemented, that they were both urban and peri-urban, which I think is also a challenge when you're working in the urban space, given the different definitions by different countries, different government entities on what is urban and what is not, that you would see this overlap. And 58% of these then had far-reaching social effects beyond their area of implementation. At the cultural level, rather at the ecosystem services level, cultural regulating and provisioning services are those that are most commonly reported. And a lot of the funding for these projects came from bilateral and multilateral donors. So not quite a lot coming from local level fundraising or even from the government. So going through very quick conclusions. So, you know, integrating climate justice in urban EBA provides short-term benefits as well as long-term. So this is always a question when we're thinking about all of these approaches, whether it's Eco-DRR or EBA, as opposed to gray infrastructure, being able to demonstrate that you're able to provide the short-term benefits. And from this study, we were able to see that the cases demonstrated that they were able to generate short-term benefits. So this paper, of course, is a start. There were only 31 cases of the myriad of cases that are being implemented globally. We would love to broaden that further. And so if, you know, anyone here has an example, we welcome sharing it. My email address and my colleagues' email address are going to be at the end of the presentation. And so overall, giving special attention to improving livelihoods and capacity building, and also gender equity strengthens institutions beyond just the EBA implementation. There's an example in Vietnam with a project using EBA for disaster risk management, where women and women's unions were involved. This project introduced EBA to the province, and that approach has been integrated broadly within the province. But one of the benefits as well was that having women be more involved in the project is demonstrating benefits. And finally, the need to foster stakeholder participation, including more vulnerable groups in the planning and implementation phase is very important. And specifically in the planning phase, I think we do a lot within this field of including these groups in the implementation phase. But it is also important to take a step back into planning to identify what the major challenges are and what are the specific priorities that these communities need to be addressed. And finally, having different scales of action. So not just, we think a lot really like either bottom up or top down, but also thinking vertically, or rather horizontally, is beneficial for the long term. And I think in the interest of time, I will stop there if there are any questions.
Thank you, Wendy. It was a super interesting presentation, and thank you very much for making that for everyone clear, the EBA and Eco-DRR. I know that's often a question I get in trainings. What's the difference? So thank you for also making that clear here today. If there are, we'll take one question live. So if anyone would like to raise their hand, please do. Now we have some hands raised, right? First person who raised their hand was Elzbieta. If you would like to unmute, you can.
Yes, hi there. Thank you very much for your presentation, Wendy. My question relates specifically to women. As you have pointed out, there is quite a big difference in terms of them being included in the processes of disaster risk management and otherwise. And I do have a question which is related to that, which is obviously they also have different needs when it comes to disasters, whether it's due to their gender specific roles or otherwise. I would just like you to elaborate a little bit more that and maybe provide some examples of those needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with this, we were not able really to dive that deep into it. But of course, from other research and the work that we do, that is very recognizable. So one of the recommendations, of course, as we're looking at it, is to be able to take into account those needs. And that is the desire to emphasize really the integration of women and other marginalized groups in the planning process, because then by identifying those specific needs, we're designing EBA and Eco-DRR approaches that then address those. So unfortunately, I wouldn't have any examples from this particular publication, but I think, going to kind of the underlying question is, yes, we do need to consider the needs and the capacities as well of all the people that we want to be involved in these projects. We also don't want to overburden different groups by, pulling them from, specifically when you're talking about women who bear a huge huge burden of, domestic responsibilities, and then we're drawing them away from that to include also thinking about taking care of the environment in addition to that. So when you're looking at planning processes that do integrate, we're taking a look at all of these approaches and making sure that the needs are identified, capacities are identified, and that the distribution of responsibility is also equitable.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks, Wendy. We'll take one last question, Raquel.
Hi, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on the different scales of action that you mentioned. And also, you said your focus was on the global south, but it seemed to me that your recommendations would be applicable basically anywhere. So wondering if there were any specificities for the global south versus other places.
I'll start with the second question in terms of the case studies. Majority of the case studies were from the global south. Of the ones that were, like I mentioned, spotlighted, we did have two from the United States, so one in Washington, DC, and one in Seattle. And the specific reason to integrate those was one focused a lot on indigenous knowledge, which we felt was replicable around the world. And the second one also was looking at the inequality. So looking at disproportionate disadvantage of communities of color in Washington, DC, which again, that has replicability. In terms of the recommendations, even though we're looking specifically at the global south, right? A lot of these recommendations are applicable. what we wanted to do with the Global South is for people to be able to look through in depth into the case studies and identify cases that have a similar socioeconomic context or similar political context to where they are. I know Central Park, for example, is a big example of thinking about nature in cities, but how many cities in the Global South can take the time to are able in 2021 to take a huge part of the city to turn it into a park? What are the governance questions there, right? No one really talks about what happened to the communities of color that lived in Central Park before it was built, because that happened a long time ago. But when we're talking about the Global South, these are questions that are happening right now. And so that's really it, rather than, you know, present a very blanket, oh, we all need green space in our cities. We're looking a little bit deeper into what does that look like in 2021 in the context of the countries that we're working at, which are some of them are new democracies, some of them are transitioning, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Very thorough response.
So Carolina, you're welcome to share your screen.
Thank you very much, Nadal. Okay.
And you're up. And as I said, in the chat, if anyone wants to go to another room, just let me know in the chat. But otherwise, Carolina, welcome. You can speak Spanish or English. It's fine.
Perfect. I think I will speak English. So, you have the translation into Spanish, I guess.
We do.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here sharing with you this exercise. Actually, this is not about a project that was born as an Eco-DRR approach, but a more traditional project. And what we did, it was kind of to ask ourselves how we transform it, or how we kind of add some NBA's elements into it. To do that, first, I would like to tell you that, again, this is as an early warning system. This considers the 4 elements of early warning systems: risk knowledge analysis, monitoring and forecasting, alert dissemination, response capacity. And for us, one really important element is that the people is in the center of the system. And when I say people, it's not the community people at risk only, but everyone involved in the system, like the person working with the municipality, the person from the local organizations, and so on. So if we acknowledge that every single person is important, we believe that the system has a more chance to work. And since our main hazard focus is mass movements, and by being in an urban area, as I would show you, they are mostly anthropically triggered, then we think that the alerts should be as early as to avoid the event when possible, or at least to avoid the disaster. And another special element is that our sensors are not kind of restrained from the access to the people, but they are more into the territory, so they are spatially integrated. So to do this exercise, what we did was to take the global standard for nature-based solutions, and we analyze how do we address every single criteria of this. So for the first criteria, we established that NBAs effectively address societal challenges. So we analyze our project, and of course, since we are focused on Eco-DRR, we focus mostly on disaster risk reduction, but we realize that we kind of face and address some of the other different challenges. Here is an example of one of the main hazards in the area. This is a landslide that happened here in 2017, didn't cause any deaths, any injuries, thanks to the time when it happens, that's midday, not many people were around, but mostly because the people were monitoring by themselves all the area. So what we analyze this is that to start with the assessment of the most pressing societal challenges, combining academic products with social cartography developed with the community. By being an area located in the rural-urban border, it has many other challenges that mostly, from both different elements. So we have poor water management, many problems, such as like here, you can see how it transforms one normal road into a simple rainfall. We have informal aqueducts with simple water problems, informal constructions, forest fires, illegal wood extraction, road and paths in poor condition. And so this is the first criteria. For the second criteria, it established that the design of MBAs is informed by scale. So to do that, we recognize the complexity and uncertainty that occurs in living dynamic landscapes, specifically in our landscapes. And as I said before, our project develops in this rural-urban border, and one of the main challenges is that the area is exposed to urban development. It has forest fires, and since it has high hazard to mass movements, this is kind of a recipe to have a lot of problems and challenges. As you can see here in this map, the lighter blue is the new houses, and you can see that there are several areas that tend to grow towards the high hazard in red. So we have not only that, but that these forest fires affect the water distribution pipes, and by doing that, it creates leaks, and the leaks can trigger landslides. So what we do also in the project is that we don't only focus on landslides, but we also do other complementary interventions, and we seek synergy with other actors such as local organizations working the water pipe maintenance. So for the criterion 3, NBOs result in a net gain to the biodiversity and ecosystem integrity. And we knew that from the beginning, since this was a traditional kind of early warning system, this wasn't our main approach. But then what we did was to integrate some elements into the sensors protection. So we always combine the element of the sensor, the protection, with trees and functional gardens with the different scales. So this kind of translates into something like this, a simple element combined with the tree that provides many ecosystem services, a simple garden with functional plants. And we do this in more than 50 areas that we are going to intervene. So we do add something for this. To do that, we managed to get the donation of more than 1,000 trees from the Public Service Office and the municipality. And we have been doing several planting days with the community and with other actors in the meeting points and in the sensors location. We also combine this with education. So we do workshops on ecosystem restoration and forest fires management. So for the criteria 4, NBAs have to be economically viable. So if we kind of comes to the point that we want to avoid disasters, of course, that reduces risk, that reduces cost. So if we want the alert to be as early as to avoid the event and as early as to avoid the disaster. But also we use low cost automatic sensors. And we also combine these with manual sensors that are constructed by the community using recycled materials. So it's kind of a multi-technical approach. For the criteria 5, that says that NPAs are based on inclusive, transparent, and empowering governance processes. This was kind of one of the lines of our projects from the start. So we are a project that both from Colombia and Germany, and it has participants from many different sectors: community, government, academy, civil society organization, and private sectors. And we have many different types of professions and technicians. So architects, geologists, engineers, and so on. So this is a multiple kind of project. And that brings a lot of challenges. So of course we have different languages, different timing, and that kind of demands that in order to build trust, we have to be really honest all the time. We have to acknowledge the difference. This is kind of a key process, and we have to be really patient because every single process takes time, but it demands continuity. So for example, we do fixed monthly meetings besides all the other activities just to keep the beat. Here you have example of good communication. So this is an exercise where we show someone from the community, one of our German partners, explain him in his really poor Spanish. So we kind of breaks the barrier of both academic language and the language barrier. So he explains him how this really complex geophysical instrument works. And they manage to understand because they want to communicate. We also have a real horizontal approach, no arrogance, no hierarchy. So here you have a photo of our German partners folding the flyers that we will give to the community. And of course, to build trust, we have to work around the food. So here's a photo of us just like sharing food with the community. And another photo of a normal field work where you have participants from all different ages, and even the pets are present. And of course, to build trust, you have to have leisure time. So you can openly talk about many things, not just the topic of the project. As for the criterion 6, we have the MBAs are equitable balance trade-off between achievement of their primary goals and the continued provision of multiple benefits. So we don't only focus on early warning system, but we want for the people to strengthen their risk management capacity so they can take actions without the participation of the project. Whenever we do an intervention, we think in the long term, so we create central like gateways with our instruments, but we want them to use them in regular days. Whenever we improve the roads, we also want them to use them in the daily mobility, but we have to look for a balance so urban development is not promoted. So almost finishing, the criteria 7, APAs are managed adaptively based on evidence. Adaptation has been one of our key elements in the project. We have been facing the change of local government, so we have to start from this crash on developing this kind of relationship. We participate in the construction of the municipal development plan to assure the inclusion of the project into the governmental agenda. We met all the different secretaries of the government. We also have to adapt to the pandemic, and where even if many of us could stay at home, the reality is that we were developing this in an informal settlement when most of the people don't have fixed jobs, so they were basically going hungry. So we collect some money among friends and we gave them some groceries like outside the project, but they basically this helped for them to realize that we really care about the welfare. So this particularly was interesting, but this increased the participation of the people even during the virtual meetings. And to finish, we have to assure that MBAs are sustainable and mainstreamed with an appropriate jurisdictional context. So since the beginning, we assure like our project is connected to the local, municipal, national, and international plans and guidances. And we look for the potential replication of the early warning system into other high-risk zones of the system. And we always try to assure the transference of the system to the local actors. So the early warning system continues once the project is finished. So with this is just like to show you that any kind of traditional disaster risk reduction project can be transformed into an Eco-DRR if we want to adapt to this. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Carolina. We have 5 minutes for questions. So you're welcome to raise your hand.
Hi, Carolina. Nice to see you. And thank you for the wonderful presentation. I've also worked a bit with early warning systems in Nepal. And one of the challenges we had there was that if we don't get full ownership of the communities to be the stewards of the early warning systems, unfortunately, they might disappear. They might get trampled on by cattle, and we find other problems. I see that you really create a lot of ownership, right, with the communities there, but did you encounter any problems with the early warning systems themselves and making sure that they are maintained in a sustainable way over time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's really important. Yeah, I agree that that's one of the key elements for the early warning system, so sustaining time, especially when for us, it's really important that the system continues after the project is finished. And to do so, what we have done is that for us, the early warning system is everything. It's not just the instrumentation. Actually, the instrumentation arrives to the very end of the project. So when the people are already more strong on risk management than in the warnings themselves. So we really try to explain them that the warnings only work if they really understand the risk. And we openly talk about the fact that there are going to be false alarms, like both positive and negative, and that it really depends on them let's say, for the system to continue in spite of that. And also another really big challenge is that this is not a traditional early warning system where you have an active landslide and you put instrumentation on them and check if it reactivates. This is an early warning system in a high hazard zone. So you don't know where the landslide is going to happen. So that's another of the challenges of the system. So we keep working with the community to help them understand that the water management is key for avoiding the landslides, that the construction techniques is key to avoiding the landslides. So we think about this as a really early alert. So the alert is the risk management itself. And yes, this is a really big challenge, but also we think that if the instrumentation is kind of there for them to see it and it's not isolated, but open for them to understand what this is for, why it's important, it also helps for them to take more appropriation of the system and for the continuity. But yeah, this is a challenge. So we don't know how it's going to work. We haven't had any landslide yet, fortunately. But yeah, we believe that at the end, the best risk management element is the one that you don't see because you actually manage to avoid the disaster.
Great, thank you. You also have a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if you can see. One is asking about establishing partnerships.
Perfect. Thank you, Pilar. Yeah, it was kind of an experiment. So of course since this is a project funded by the Ministry of Education of Germany, so that brought also many other challenges because they can invest in education for Germany in some local actions in Colombia, but not in the big investment on the instrumentation and so on. So since the beginning, the project was thought about involving the local government, involving organizations that work in the area and that they understand how the community works, involving some leaders of the community. Although, to be honest, like we have been adapting the project since the beginning because the project was developed to be kind of understanding the city, the risk management in the city, and just after the first year to identify the location. But since we knew that every single location is kind of has some particularities, we convinced our German partners to identify the specific sectors since the beginning. So that way we involve the local community from the scratch. There are also several universities that work in the area, and in Germany there are other kind of private companies that want to take this to test their instrumentation. And many other people have been adding to the project since they realize how, kind of the importance of this and the potential to replicate in other areas of the system. So all the time we receive new partners. And since this is an open and transparent kind of project, we have no problems to involve whoever is interested and can add to this.
We have now a bit of an open space to really think through, because we've learned a lot now in the last few days. And what can we do with some of this work that we know that is ongoing, that you know, now maybe you've heard, maybe there's some new partnerships that you think, okay, there's this person, I'm working on something really similar, maybe we can, you know, join forces, or contrary, maybe this person has some expertise that I really need in a potential project idea. So I would invite you once again to kind of move back to our Miro board, because it is, let's say, the only space that we can use in an online environment. You know, if we were not in an online environment, well, we would have different ways of being able to go about that. And if we take a look at these boards so far, what has been really interesting, I have been taking a look at it's great to see that some people have already put some new ideas about project ideas, new research ideas here in the technical advances, thinking about some of the things that we have discussed this morning. Sorry, I'm looking at a different screen, but I hope, and so we have some names and questions and things, so you're welcome to please take a look. If we can also post the link once again. We have some new research ideas, or already one person has posted for a new publication idea, so this would be now a good time to see, can we start to make some connections as PEDRR, as our Partnership for Environment Disaster Risk Reduction, but also those of you who are from, let's say, the Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation, as we had our presentation from our other keynote. Also, yesterday, the things have moved a little bit around, but that's okay. Other things that we can start to think of about, have a board on Eco-DRR in urban areas, like what would be some of the next steps at regional level that could be undertaken. To see that we already have some work by people in Latin America thinking about sustainable drainage systems, which, you know, are also really important as climate changes. Also maybe in other regions there is work being ongoing that we can start to think about what could we do next together. Whether that be also in urban areas, when we can think about these large ongoing projects like making cities resilient, which is a UNDRR project. But I'm going to pause here to see if anybody would, and stop sharing my screen, to see if anybody would like to kind of add some of their reflections now from the last couple of days about thinking about moving forwards with Eco-DRR, or any other reflections you would like to make.
Yes, as I participated in Marta Vicarelli's kind of, you know, meta-analysis of the current research, and what we found is there's a lot of projections, and everybody is focusing on, you know, what the future, making projections based on certain assumptions that are going on. And almost as a policy person, I almost feel like I can go and pick the projection that I want in order to match the results that I feel like I need to have. Is in some sense that there's going to be some significant monitoring of these past research studies to be able to cull through these things and say, yes, this projection worked well. We actually go through this. This was a good projection. This was a bad projection. We should trash this one, and make some sense about which projections are most significant and are real, are the most useful for people going forward.
Yeah, I believe that that's also part of the work that the IPCC is doing, but I could be mistaken. But it is a good point that one can also use, you know, some of these results to our benefit, or which benefit of who.
Exactly.
It is a good point. And I think that's also something, you know, which you know, we've also brought in, is like when we're thinking about disaster risk reduction, like how much do we take into account thinking through some of these future scenarios? That's also a question. It's maybe often more done in climate change adaptation, but this highlights the synergies necessary between the two.
I think as these disasters continue to happen, the floods in Germany and the heat in Italy and in other areas and in Canada this summer, those kind of things offer opportunity to say, okay, well, this projection worked in this situation, this one didn't. We need to move along and trash the ones that aren't working very well based on real life scenarios.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I see a second hand. Please, you can, it's Marta.
Hello. I think that something, so this is a conversation that we were having with David and the other members of our team. It's probably very helpful setting up strong monitoring of these programs and projects, because then we can share fast information about what works and what doesn't. I guess this is something that many local leaders are also struggling with. So just anecdotally, I'm currently working with the municipalities in Massachusetts in trying to understand what their resilience to climate change needs are. And I'm doing this with the large team of researchers from my university. And one of their biggest problems is to understand what works and to implement it in the fastest way possible. So I guess that my little contribution here is that monitoring and an evaluation of these programs is really, really important, as well as creating networks for collaboration, for sharing information. That's why it was so interesting to be at this symposium for the past 2 days to see what happens in our parts of the world.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes me think, as a network, right? As PEDRR, we're also like the clearinghouse for some of this knowledge. And what is our role in this like monitoring and evaluation of work? I think that's just an open-ended question that we're not necessarily going to answer here and now, but maybe think of what our role also could be in that. I see Raquel would like to.
Yes, I actually wanted to build on what Marta just mentioned. And the fact, and I put a comment, and I don't know if it's clear on the board, saying that I think we need more average cases that can be replicated, because Natalie, in her very interesting presentation, did mention the fact that, Bonn is just a regular city, a city like many in Europe. And I think that sometimes case studies are the extremes, and we are lacking this type of studies like hers in Bonn with the average case, with what happens actually in a lot of or could happen in a lot of places. And so building on what Marta said, I think having more examples of the average, what can actually be implemented in many different places, so that people don't have to make a mistake and then recover from the mistake and implement something else, but can already build on a probably successful option. So yeah, I would really think that these clearinghouses, as you were mentioning, Natalie, would be really important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think that's something like, we were aiming on our PEDRR website. We were also aiming to think through, can we, put some more case studies, but then at the same time, there are so many case study places, what's the role?
Yeah, but like building on Wendy's research, she did this cross case study analysis. So she was able to bring these lessons from the different case studies. I guess it's kind of doing more of these integrative analysis.
I think that's a great idea, to put an idea on the board and see who would like to join on that. That's a very good idea. Carolina, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think, I work in the government, and after being in the academy for several years, one of the things that you realize is that we have so different timing in the academy and the government. So they do a lot of planning and so on, but they are more like depending, at least in Latin America, depending in the government that is in the specific time. So that's your ally. yeah, you want to be in the long-term plan, but you have to be related to the local government. And here we have really bad participation in the governmental decisions. So I think that one of the things we have to change is that we have to be part of the planning of each local government. We call it here development plan. So if all the universities that work in this, if all the organizations that work in this kind of pushes and participate in those meetings, I think that there is a higher chance that this is included in the governmental agenda. So yeah, we can do a lot of, as you mentioned, a lot of study cases, but if we want this to transform into a larger scale, we have to be more kind of strategic in our participation with the local governments.
I think that's a very good point. Josephine, you raised your hand.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you very much so far. You have been very good. I want to find out from you, in Nigeria, we have always believed in tree planting. I'm relatively new to all of this, but I was involved in a presidential initiative for afforestation, which is tree planting. Do you think tree planting can be a success to nature-based solution and it can be adopted in Nigeria? And what is the funding mechanisms? Because I don't look at all of this. I don't know where we are starting from. I don't know where we are going. So these are my worries and my concerns. If you can clear this, then I know the way forward. Thank you very much. Josephine Osagi is my name. I work with National Biosafety Management Agency in Nigeria.
Thank you so much for your question.
I love nature. So
thank you. We do, and it's a very good question. And you know, tree planting and afforestation, or better, reforestation, it can be, but it depends on why and where and which species are being
okay.
Yeah. So at least if we look at also the definition of nature-based solutions, you really want to take into account the local level landscape, biodiversity, which type of species that you're planting, and what are you planting them for. If you're planting them for reducing disaster risk on, let's say, in watersheds or on slopes, if you're planting them, but then, you know, if it's for, let's say, agroforestry, for more food related, it depends on the reason you're using tree planting, what type of species and where. And that will also help determine in terms, you know, thinking through funding, things like that. I don't know if anybody else would like to comment on that question.
Hello.
Yes, can you hear us?
Hello. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Doswa. Thank you very much again. I would like us to discuss and expatiate on these topics. They are very important. I have worked in forestry. That's where the Presidential Initiative for Afforestation emanated. Forestry, Federal Department of Forestry. So great. I would like us to expatiate on this and how we can collaborate. And you did not mention the funding area. The funding.
Yes. If you take a look in the chat, my colleague Karen Sudmeyer has put her email, and you're welcome to email her, and we can take this discussion on further afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you.
Also, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Karen. You also had a point.
Yes, thanks again to all the participants who have added your names for project ideas. I see most of the excitement came from the PEDRR Winter School collaboration. Don't hesitate to put in new sticky notes if you've run out of space there. I also want to mention that you've been a bit modest on the work that you've done on Words into Action. On nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction. It's really it's a flagship document that came out this year, which really is intended to help national governments and communities in terms of how to actually go from words into action on nature-based solutions. And a lot of colleagues who contributed to that report are here today and have been here yesterday as well. So I just want to encourage you to look at the section on the board called Science Policy. Some of you are probably working with national or local governments, and there are plans for workshops, for training with various governments in how to make this nature-based solutions for disaster reduction more actionable. And if you'd like to participate in that or have any other ideas on how to contribute, please put your name on the board related to that. So I just wanted to mention that and to encourage you to keep adding your ideas, even if there are no more Post-its there. I think there's another way of adding ideas. And thanks again for your participation. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yes, thanks, Karen. And I think, that follows on from what Carolina was saying about, getting more involved in the local government planning. Sometimes, to be able to, I don't know my feeling, but it'd be interesting to hear from others. Sometimes, sometimes the first step is also raising awareness depending on where you are. And if there's any interest in, in working to do that at national level, there are many people here on this today in this symposium. And so I do encourage to kind of, put your name down on the boards, either on the urban areas or the science policy, to see if we can, team up to work on some of these things together, because that's what PEDRR and this network is for us, either within region or cross region, which is also we can learn from each other to kind of, move forwards. And I already see some, also Josephine, for instance, thank you very much. We already starting to inspire and get maybe some new collaborations and plans going. So I haven't looked in the board for a little while to see what else we have. So I don't know if anybody else would like to add some of their thoughts. Still have a couple of minutes before we move on.
Hola a todos. Muy buenos días. Soy Michelle.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm Michelle. I'm from Ecuador. And first off, I would like to congratulate you all for such a wonderful symposium. I paid close attention to each of the case studies that have been presented here. And I would also like to extend my appreciation for allowing me to join this symposium. I believe that these projects should be replicated in my country. We're now working hand in hand with the Ministry of the Environment. So please, if you believe that it would be possible to engage in some kind of collaboration, or perhaps should we be able to replicate some of your projects here, have they been successful, please let us know, because perhaps we can do a lot of things together. Ecuador is a highly diverse country from a flora and fauna perspective, so we could implement projects with regards to marshes, to wetlands. Therefore, all such projects would be most welcome. So I'm going to post my email address via chat should you want to contact me. And just in case you believe that you could replicate some of our projects in my country. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm pretty sure that we'll be getting in, many people will be getting in touch. I see James. James, are you still around?
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. Yes, I'm very much allowed.
Great.
And I can say that there seems to be quite a lot of things that we can be able to do in the continent. And it's quite encouraging to have attended the meeting. And there are so many things that I've also learned. One of the things that I feel that is quite interesting is like when we are using forests and trees in the case of reducing disasters, especially on the roads. There is a project that was, there is a paper that was done that was presented this afternoon on the case of Switzerland, how trees are helping in the reduction of the rock falls. And what comes in my mind is that this is something, because largest rights is a big issue, or it's a big problem in some of our countries, like in Kenya and other parts of Africa. We go to Sierra Leone, you still find the same problems. And I think this is something that I think that this is a project that we can be able to take up and share together. Thank you.
For our European North America.
Exactly, because my colleague Udo, who's technically leading it, is not there, and I'm supporting him there. No, just speaking after James, and I'm glad to be in the same meeting with you. I just can echo what you said. I feel we've heard a lot of different case studies, and we've seen a lot of enthusiasm around this topic of Eco-DRR, and I can just say that I find it particularly enriching to see what is possible across countries and across regions, and this cross-fertilization also beyond the regional network, which have a lot of value, but seeing beyond and looking what is happening in other countries or in other cities which might be comparable, echoing some of the case studies we've just heard, that I feel is a huge potential. We've only like scratching on the surface. We could do so much more, and I'm really enjoying this meeting because it is giving us a lot of perspectives.
Thank you, Simone. Cesar, would you like to take the floor for Latin America?
Ok, voy a continuar en español. Veo unas oportunidades grandes.
I spot huge opportunities ahead to run joint projects. I believe that we could share experiences in our region because we speak the same language or because of proximity. And also because we could use some of the networks currently in place that offers huge potential. However, something we're still missing out, and that is more involvement by governmental agencies. Many efforts are made in the academic sector, but that is not necessarily reflected in the public arena. So I believe that in that case, something needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Cesar. Yes, and that's something that we do need to continue. That science policy dialogue is really necessary. Marwa, hello.
Yeah. Hi, Natalie. Hi, everyone. Yeah, actually, from my side, I cannot agree more with what Simona, James, Cesar, what I've reflected. But actually, I like to add as well that I have enjoyed the symposium format very much. It was really, you know, dynamics, and in just a couple of hours per day, we are learning lots of stuff. Which really keep us, you know, alert with what is going around from different regions of the world. The short presentations for case studies that already, or projects that happened on the ground, was quite interesting. I felt that the messages we were on the lessons learned, we are trying to convey in our lectures, are now, it's, coming to implementation, the effectiveness of the partnership and the necessity for community involvement, as we have seen in the informal settlements in Madeleine. The combination of the gray and green infrastructures and how this can be effective in coastal management. So actually, I felt that, yes, it bring us to become fresh. Thank you very much, Natalie, for the perfect organization. It was really lovely again, and also to see all our friends from the different parts. So I'm really grateful. Thank you. And for all the participants as well.
Thank you, Marwa. Now, I believe Emma from the Asia Pacific has actually had to leave, but in case I'm wrong, Emma, are you around? I think she has had to leave, but anyway, I'm sure she will echo everyone. Zita also can't join today from PEDRR, but maybe Karen would like to give again a perspective from PEDRR before we move to the PEDRR Awards.
Well, again, thank you, colleagues. I want to mention as a follow-up action, one thing that we are planning is to develop a global training of trainer course. We had 4 training of trainers in each region in 2019, in Latin America, in Asia Pacific, in North America, North Africa, Middle East, and we've also, let's see, there's one that's missing there, and Africa, of course, with Professor James. That was in 2019, before we were no longer able to travel. We're now planning on doing a large online training of trainers. And we actually also had one in Japan recently. I don't know if we still have now Faruta online, and we're planning one in China actually in a few weeks' time. But I would like to also let you know to please sign up for our newsletter, where you can get news on any of these upcoming events, such as the Global Training of Trainers. We'll make sure to keep you informed. We would like to create a library of case studies from all of the different wonderful things we've heard today. For example, we might come back to you and invite you to add a case study to our global library, and set up an online platform for having this kind of global training of trainers, so we can continue to interact. So that's more on the teaching side of things. We'll see how we can take forward the winter school, and definitely on the global, on the science policy interface. Extremely important, and we'll continue to give you updates on that. So thanks again for all of your time. Don't forget about the newsletter. We also have the experts roster on our website. And also, if you're interested in joining one of the, as an institution, you can join one of the regional networks, and we'll update those networks and those maps after this symposium. So please put your names down on the Miro board. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks again, Natalie.
Thank you. Now, what you may or may not have been waiting for. Can you see my screen? And now let me try and make this full screen, and let me try and get the correct. Once again, I want to be able to display settings. Thank you. Okay. So as we had mentioned, many of you have submitted many posters. We had 26 posters, and they're all really excellent and difficult to choose and compare also between them. Because of the difficulty of comparison, we decided to open up several categories for these awards, and being around education, around field study, desk-based study, broadening horizons of Eco-DRR, and also young researcher, which we felt was really important. So the PEDRR Champion Awards, as I said, it was in consultation with all the PEDRR focal points, the PEDRR chair, the PEDRR secretariat, as well as taking into account your votes on the Miro board. Now, what would the PEDRR Champion Award entail? It will mean that your work will be featured in our newsletter. We'll also could do a story and a monthly story on our website, and as well also presents your work maybe through a PEDRR webinars. So I think those are, but of course, everybody else, your work will be on the website. And I said it was very difficult to choose. Now for education, all waiting, I am sure, education poster that was that received the most votes from examining instruction methodologies for Eco-DRR in the Human Ecology Education Program in the Philippines. So congratulations to Almira and all of her associates. We will be getting in touch with you, and thank you again. Desk-based study. Desk-based study, are you all waiting to see who? Well, it has to go to Marta and her team, looking at the global review of economic efficiency and equity. You'll also see by the huge number of green dots. So well done, Marta, and all of your team on this work and on continuing work. Okay, field study, once again, difficult because there were so many really good ones, and you know, can only pick one. So we have an original study looking at cultivating crops in Laha landscapes. So well done to Marco Hisma, and I thought this was a really original and different work in the field of Eco-DRR. Something definitely learned something very new, so well done. Broadening horizons, this was difficult, and it was a tie between two, and so but we could only choose one in the end, and it will go to those kind of broadening Eco-DRR into humanitarian contexts, which is of course, you know, new work, and really congratulate those who are pushing these horizons for Eco-DRR. And then finally, I think if you look at the Miro board, it is obvious. The young researcher, we really need to congratulate Natalie Senger, who also presented today. Really well done, and for your work. It's really interesting. So there we have it. Congratulations to everyone. We will be getting in touch with you for featuring your work in our newsletter, and also thinking through for a PEDRR webinar on your work. Obviously, I do want to recognize all the other posters were excellent, and we're really proud to have been able to show them at this symposium. So if anybody would like to, any of those who have been nominated would like to say something, you have some space. And I see Marta has already.
I just wanted to say hello to everybody. It was really a wonderful symposium for me. And I'm also very happy about this award, especially for the students who worked so much on this. I think they're going to be ecstatic about it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Talking of students, Natalie Senger, are you around? Would you like to say hello?
Yes, thank you so much. I actually don't really know what to say. I feel very honored. And also during my presentation session, I was really overwhelmed by all the incoming questions in the chat, and I copied them. I tried to answer them now, and I'm absolutely happy about the interest in this research. And I also want to thank you, my supervisors, Dr. Simone Sandholz and Dr. Christiane Stephan, for supervising this research, and all other people who supported me during this journey. This wouldn't have been possible without them. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalie. Let's see who else is still online. I see that Nini, probably you can say something for the friends for the working group.
Thank you so much, Natalie and colleagues, and thank you for this recognition of the work. That's really excellent that we're getting pick up an interest in really what's the role of Eco-DRR, specifically in humanitarian contexts, and also in disaster management and response stages. So anyone who's interested in joining that part of the discussions, I've just put the link in the chat, and we're very keen to keep the discussion going. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Actually, this is a good point. If everyone who's around wants to put their video on, we can try and take a screenshot as a nice memento. So if you can put your camera on, if that's feasible, and understand if you can't, don't worry. But if you can, we'll try and take a screenshot. So we have several pages, so I will take a few screenshots. So say Eco-DRR. Thank you. And then Symposium. And it's really nice to see you all. I really hope you enjoyed the Symposium. It was a pleasure. Obviously, it would have been great if we could have all met in person, but probably easier for many of you across the world to not be in person. But we will definitely follow up. The Miro board will still be open through to the end of the week, so please make sure if you have any ideas or things you would like to add and take a look, especially Marta and Nidhi, because there's lots of interest in the PEDDR Winter School, which is fantastic, and the PEDDR Secretariat will support as much as needed. And yes, and I also want to congratulate, of course, all people who have submitted the posters, because they were all absolutely excellent. And we will, you know, maybe it would be great. We'll follow up with you also from case studies for PEDDR, as Karen had mentioned.